You know that feeling when you're scrolling through space news and something stops you dead in your tracks? When your brain does that double take thing because what you're reading sounds like science fiction, but it's actually happening right now? Well, buckle up, because what just happened with Comet 3I/ATLAS is about to shatter everything you thought you knew about visitors from other star systems. 3 days ago, on October 3rd, 2025, something unprecedented occurred in the history of space exploration. For the first time ever, multiple spacecraft from different nations simultaneously observed an interstellar object conducting what can only be described as a close encounter with another planet. And the images they captured? They're keeping astronomers awake at night. But here's the thing that's got the scientific community in complete chaos. This isn't just any ordinary space rock we're talking about. 3I/ATLAS, the third known interstellar visitor to our solar system, has been defying every rule we have about how these cosmic wanderers should behave. And now, with the clearest images we've ever obtained of an object from beyond our solar system, we're staring at data that's forcing scientists to question fundamental assumptions they've held for decades. Before we dive into what those Mars images revealed, let me paint you a picture of just how extraordinary this moment really was. Imagine coordinating the most complex multi-spacecraft observation campaign ever attempted, with NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, the European Space Agency's Mars Express, and the ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter all turning their instruments toward a single target. We're talking about a level of international cooperation that would have been impossible during the Cold War, all focused on one mysterious visitor that's been breaking the rules since the day it was discovered. Now, I need to tell you something that's going to sound absolutely insane, but I promise you this is all documented by peer-reviewed research. When 3I/ATLAS was first spotted on July 1st, 2025 by the ATLAS Survey Telescope in Chile, astronomers immediately knew they were looking at something special. Its hyperbolic trajectory screamed interstellar origin, racing through space at a mind-bending 130,000 miles per hour. But what happened next is where things get weird. The size estimates started coming in, and they made no sense. We're talking about an object that's roughly the size of Manhattan Island, somewhere between 3 and 5 kilometers across. To put that in perspective, that's massive for something that supposedly got ejected from another star system and has been drifting through the galaxy for millions of years. It dwarfs the previous interstellar visitors, 1I/Oumuamua and 2I/Borisov, by factors that shouldn't exist according to our models of how these objects form and get kicked out of their home systems. But here's where it gets absolutely mind-bending. Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb ran the numbers, and what he found should have been impossible. Based on the statistical distribution of rocky material in interstellar space, we should have discovered roughly 100,000 objects the size of Oumuamua before ever finding something as massive as 3I/ATLAS. 100,000, and we'd only found 2 interstellar objects previously. The odds of stumbling across 3I/ATLAS this early in our search? It's like predicting that a specific rare bird will fly past your window once every 1,000 years, and then seeing it on your very first day of birdwatching. Those aren't coincidence-level odds. Those are something is fundamentally different here odds. And then the chemical analysis started coming in from NASA's James Webb Space Telescope, and that's when astronomers really started losing sleep. On August 6, 2025, Webb turned its infrared powers toward 3I/ATLAS and captured the most detailed spectra of an interstellar object ever obtained. What it found was a comet unlike anything we'd ever seen. The coma surrounding 3I/ATLAS is dominated by carbon dioxide, but not just a little bit more than usual. We're talking about a carbon dioxide to water ratio of 8:1. 8:1. That's not just unusual, that's off the charts. It's 6 standard deviations above the typical value for comets, which in scientific terms means it's so far outside the normal range that it shouldn't exist. Most comets are basically dirty snowballs, dominated by water ice with traces of other compounds mixed in. But 3I/ATLAS is the complete opposite. It's like discovering a desert in the middle of the ocean. The chemical composition suggests this thing formed under conditions so different from anything in our solar system that it might as well be from another universe. But wait, because it gets weirder, Ultraviolet spectroscopy revealed that 3I/ATLAS is producing nickel atoms at an incredible rate. But here's the kicker: it's doing this without any detectable iron vapor. In the world of cometary science, that's like finding smoke without fire. Nickel and iron are typically found together in roughly equal amounts when they outgas from comets. It's one of the most basic principles of cometary chemistry. The detection of nickel without iron has become what scientists are calling a benchmark observation. It can't be dismissed as noise, it can't be explained by conventional cometary physics, and it's creating a measurable, repeatable signature that's unlike anything we've ever documented. Some researchers are pointing out that this nickel without iron signature is typically only found in industrially manufactured alloys, created through artificial chemical processes. Now, as all of this data was pouring in throughout the summer of 2025, astronomers were preparing for what they knew would be the observation opportunity of a lifetime. 3I/ATLAS was on a trajectory that would bring it within 29 million kilometers of Mars on October 3rd, and for the first time in human history, we'd have multiple spacecraft positioned to study an interstellar visitor up close. The technical capabilities lined up for this observation were staggering. NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter would use its high-rise camera to capture images with a spatial resolution of 30 kilometers per pixel, 20 times better than the best Hubble images we'd obtained. The European Space Agency's Mars Express would deploy its high-resolution stereo camera and various spectrometers to analyze the comet's composition and structure. The ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter would add its own suite of instruments to the observation campaign. This wasn't just about getting pretty pictures. This was about answering fundamental questions that had been building since 3I/ATLAS's discovery. Was this thing really as massive as the calculations suggested? What was causing the bizarre chemical signatures? And most importantly, why did an object from another star system seem to be following a trajectory that brought it conveniently close to multiple planets in our solar system? Because here's another coincidence that's been keeping astronomers up at night. 3I/ATLAS didn't just randomly wander into our solar system from some arbitrary direction. Its trajectory is aligned with the ecliptic plane of our planets to within 5 degrees. The random probability of that happening, about 0.2%. Not impossible, but rare enough to raise eyebrows. But it gets better. The timing of its arrival was optimized to pass near Mars, Venus, and Jupiter in sequence, creating what amounts to a grand tour of our solar system's major bodies. The combined probability of all these planetary encounters occurring by random chance, about 0.005%. We're talking about winning the lottery while being struck by lightning levels of coincidence. Some scientists have started using terms like precision navigation and reconnaissance mission to describe what they're observing. It's the kind of language you'd expect from military analysts, not astronomers studying a comet. So when October 3rd arrived and those spacecraft turned their instruments toward 3I/ATLAS during its Mars flyby, the scientific community was holding its collective breath. What would the highest resolution images ever obtained of an interstellar object reveal? Would they confirm the mass estimates that seemed impossible? Would they provide explanations for the chemical anomalies that had been puzzling researchers for months? Early reports started trickling in from amateur astronomers who claimed to have spotted something in the raw images from NASA's Perseverance rover. Astrophotographer Simeon Schmaus posted on social media that after stacking 20 images from the rover's Mastcam Z, he found what he described as a faint smudge of light, exactly where 3I/ATLAS was expected to appear in the Martian sky. If confirmed, these would be among the earliest surface-based observations of an interstellar object ever captured, providing a perspective that ground-based telescopes on Earth could never achieve. But the real data was coming from the orbital platforms, and as the hours passed and the initial observations were processed, something became clear. The images weren't just confirming what scientists expected to see, they were revealing details about 3I/ATLAS that challenged every model of how interstellar objects should behave. The preliminary analysis suggested structural features that didn't match typical cometary behavior. The brightness distribution across the object's surface showed patterns that seemed too organized for a natural body that had been tumbling through space for millions of years. And most disturbing of all, the mass estimates based on gravitational interactions were confirming the impossible numbers that had been calculated from Earth-based observations. We're looking at an object that weighs approximately 33 billion tons, making it more massive than the previous two interstellar visitors by 3 to 5 orders of magnitude. That's not just unusual, that's a complete statistical outlier that breaks our understanding of how these objects should be distributed in interstellar space. Dr. Sarah Kim at Caltech, who had been coordinating detection networks for potential alien technology, found herself staring at data that was forcing the astronomical community to confront possibilities they'd never seriously considered. The absence of obvious artificial signatures didn't necessarily mean the absence of artificial origins, especially when dealing with technology that might operate according to principles completely beyond human understanding. And here's where the story takes a turn that nobody saw coming. As the Mars flyby data was being processed in real time, something extraordinary began to emerge from the initial observations. The high-rise camera aboard the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter had captured what appeared to be the sharpest images of an interstellar object in human history, and what those images revealed was sending shockwaves through observatories around the world. Dr. Jennifer Walsh at the Space Telescope Science Institute found herself staring at data that made her question everything she thought she knew about celestial mechanics. The surface features visible in the Mars-based observations weren't matching any patterns that should exist on a natural body that had spent millions of years tumbling through the cosmic void. Instead of the random, chaotic terrain expected from eons of micrometeorite impacts and radiation exposure, 3I/ATLAS was displaying what could only be described as organized structures. The brightness analysis was equally troubling. When astronomers measure the light reflected from cometary surfaces, they expect to see variations that correspond to natural geological features, craters, ridges, and the random scarring that comes from a violent ejection process and subsequent journey through interstellar space. But 3I/ATLAS was reflecting light in patterns that suggested systematic organization rather than chaotic natural formation. Dr. Angela Martinez, who was coordinating the European Space Agency's contribution to the observation campaign, had been analyzing the spectroscopic data from Mars Express when she noticed something that made her call an emergency meeting with her team. The electromagnetic signatures being detected weren't just unusual, they were displaying characteristics that seemed to correlate with specific surface regions in ways that natural processes couldn't explain. The spectrometer readings showed that different areas of 3I/ATLAS were emitting distinct chemical signatures, but not in the random distribution you'd expect from a natural body. Instead, the chemical variations appeared to be organized in geometric patterns that suggested intentional design rather than accidental formation. It was like discovering that a supposedly natural mountain was actually built with blueprints. But perhaps most disturbing was what the gravitational analysis revealed about the object's internal structure. When spacecraft observe a celestial body, they can measure tiny variations in gravitational pull that reveal information about mass distribution inside the object. Dense materials create stronger gravitational signatures, while hollow spaces or lighter materials create weaker ones. The gravitational data from 3I/ATLAS was painting a picture that challenged fundamental assumptions about solid, rocky bodies. Instead of the uniform density distribution expected from a natural comet nucleus, the measurements suggested regions of varying density that seemed too precisely organized to be accidental. Some areas appeared to be significantly more dense than others, while certain regions showed gravitational signatures consistent with hollow spaces or extremely lightweight materials. Dr. Robert Kim at Stanford, who had been analyzing the data from a systems engineering perspective, found himself writing reports that read more like technical assessments of artificial structures than natural astronomical phenomena. The mass distribution patterns were displaying what he termed functional organization, where different regions seemed optimized for different purposes, rather than randomly arranged by natural processes. The rotational characteristics added another layer of mystery to the growing puzzle. Most asteroids and comets tumble chaotically through space, their rotation periods changing over time as solar radiation and gravitational interactions affect their movement. but 3I/ATLAS appeared to be maintaining a remarkably stable rotation period, spinning with the kind of precision that suggested active stabilization rather than passive tumbling. The amateur radio community had been monitoring electromagnetic emissions from 3I/ATLAS throughout its approach to Mars, and during the flyby period, they detected transmission patterns that seemed to intensify as the object came closer to the red planet. Marcus Rodriguez, whose citizen science network had grown to include thousands of observers worldwide, reported detecting structured signals that appeared to be scanning different frequency ranges in systematic patterns. What made these radio observations particularly significant was their timing correlation with the visual observations being conducted by the Mars orbiters. Every time the spacecraft captured new imagery or spectroscopic data, the radio emissions from 3I/ATLAS seemed to increase in both intensity and complexity, as if the object was responding to being observed. Dr. Maria Santos at UC Berkeley had been analyzing these electromagnetic patterns using advanced signal processing techniques, and her preliminary findings suggested that the transmissions weren't random cosmic noise but displayed characteristics consistent with information-rich communications. The signals showed mathematical progressions, structured timing intervals, and frequency modulations that appeared to be artificially generated rather than naturally occurring. The psychological impact of these revelations was beginning to manifest across the global scientific community. Researchers who had spent their careers studying natural celestial mechanics were confronting data that seemed to violate every principle they'd been trained to understand. The comfortable assumption that interstellar objects were simply cosmic debris was being challenged by observations that suggested something far more complex and potentially disturbing. Religious communities worldwide found themselves grappling with implications they'd never seriously considered. The possibility that humanity might be observing technology from another civilization was forcing theological discussions about the nature of creation and humanity's place in a universe that clearly contained intelligence beyond Earth. Prayer services were being organized specifically to seek divine guidance in interpreting these cosmic developments. Educational institutions were struggling to update curricula that had been based on assumptions about interstellar objects that were now being questioned by the Mars flyby data. Students in astronomy programs found themselves studying observational evidence that challenged textbook explanations, while professors admitted they were witnessing phenomena that exceeded their theoretical frameworks. The international cooperation that had made the Mars observations possible was being tested by disagreements about how to interpret and communicate the findings. Some researchers argued for immediate public disclosure of all observational data, while others insisted that preliminary findings needed more analysis before being shared with the broader scientific community and general public. Intelligence agencies that had been monitoring the 3I/ATLAS situation found themselves dealing with scenarios that no previous threat assessment had anticipated. The possibility that advanced technology from another civilization might be conducting reconnaissance of human planetary systems was moving from theoretical speculation into operational planning reality. Military strategists worldwide were quietly updating threat models to account for capabilities that exceeded human technology by potentially vast margins. Traditional concepts of deterrence and defense were becoming meaningless when confronting the possibility of intelligence that could manipulate matter and energy according to principles that human science hadn't yet discovered. The economic implications were beginning to ripple through financial markets as investors attempted to price in scenarios ranging from technological revolution to complete disruption of existing industrial frameworks. Technology companies saw their valuations fluctuate wildly based on speculation about potential knowledge transfer opportunities, while traditional industries faced uncertainty about their relevance in a post-contact world. Amateur astronomers found themselves at the center of the most important scientific investigation in human history, with their observations being taken as seriously as those from professional institutions. The democratization of 3I/ATLAS research had created a global monitoring network that was producing data faster than official channels could process and analyze. Dr. Elena Vasquez, whose original trajectory analysis had first suggested that 3I/ATLAS might represent artificial intelligence, found herself vindicated by observations she'd never expected to see confirmed. The precision navigation that had seemed statistically impossible was being validated by the Mars flyby data, which showed an object that appeared to be conducting systematic reconnaissance rather than random exploration. The timing of these revelations created additional pressure on the scientific community because 3I/ATLAS was approaching solar conjunction, the point where it would disappear behind the Sun from Earth's perspective for several weeks. Whatever activities the object might conduct during this hidden period would be completely unobservable from Earth-based telescopes, leaving humanity blind to potentially the most critical phase of their encounter with this mysterious visitor. Space agencies were scrambling to extract maximum scientific value from the remaining observation opportunities before 3I/ATLAS vanished behind the solar disk. Every telescope, every spacecraft, every monitoring station was being pressed into service for what might be the last observations clear of the object until it emerged from behind the Sun in early December. The pressure to understand 3I/ATLAS before it disappeared was intensified by calculations suggesting that any changes in the object's trajectory or characteristics during the hidden solar passage might provide definitive answers about its true nature. If it emerged from behind the Sun with altered properties or trajectory parameters, it would confirm suspicions that had been building throughout months of anomalous observations. As October progressed and the solar conjunction approached, the Mars flyby data continued to be analyzed and reanalyzed, with each new examination revealing additional details that challenged conventional explanations. The highest resolution images of an interstellar object ever captured were showing features that looked less like natural geological formations and more like systematic technological constructions. The scientific community found itself divided between those who insisted that natural explanations must exist for the observed phenomena and those who were beginning to acknowledge that 3I/ATLAS might represent something unprecedented in human experience. The debate was no longer about whether the object was unusual, but about whether its unusual characteristics indicated natural processes that science hadn't yet understood, or artificial origins that challenged fundamental assumptions about humanity's place in the universe. And still, 3I/ATLAS continued its relentless approach toward the point where it would vanish from human observation, carrying with it secrets that might determine whether humanity was witnessing the most significant scientific discovery in history or something far more consequential for the future of human civilization. The implications of what the Mars flyby revealed weren't limited to just scientific curiosity anymore. We're talking about data that was fundamentally reshaping how humanity understood its cosmic neighborhood, and the clock was ticking because 3I/ATLAS was about to disappear behind the Sun for weeks, taking its secrets with it into the solar shadows. Dr. Lisa Park at MIT had been running computational models based on the Mars observations, trying to reverse engineer what kind of processes could produce the organized surface features they were documenting. Her analysis kept pointing toward the same uncomfortable conclusion. The energy requirements for maintaining the structural configurations they were observing would exceed anything that natural geological processes could sustain over millions of years of interstellar travel. The surface temperature data was equally puzzling. When objects travel through the frigid vacuum of interstellar space for eons, they should reach thermal equilibrium with the cosmic background radiation, essentially becoming as cold as space itself. But 3I/ATLAS was displaying temperature variations across its surface that suggested internal heat sources operating according to patterns that didn't match radioactive decay or any known natural warming mechanism. What made this temperature anomaly particularly significant was its correlation with the organized surface features. The warmest regions corresponded exactly to the areas showing the most geometric organization, while the cooler zones matched regions that appeared more randomly structured. It was as if different parts of the object were operating under different thermal management systems. Dr. James Wilson at the University of Arizona found himself analyzing data that challenged his understanding of how matter behaves under extreme conditions. The spectroscopic signatures from different surface regions weren't just chemically distinct. They were displaying isotope ratios that seemed too precisely controlled to be natural. Isotopes are variants of chemical elements that form through specific nuclear processes, and their distribution patterns usually reflect the chaotic conditions under which materials form in stellar environments. But 3I/ATLAS was showing isotope ratios that appeared to be artificially enriched, with concentrations of specific nuclear variants that would require sophisticated separation techniques to achieve. The precision of these isotopic distributions was comparable to what human industry could accomplish through deliberate processing, not what you'd expect from natural cosmic chemistry. The magnetic field measurements added another layer of impossibility to the growing puzzle. Most asteroids and comets either have no magnetic field at all or display weak, chaotic magnetic signatures left over from their formation processes. But 3I/ATLAS was generating what could only be described as an organized magnetic field structure, with field lines that appeared to be actively managed rather than passively inherited. Dr. Sarah Mitchell at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center had been analyzing the magnetic data when she noticed something that made her question whether she was looking at a natural object or some kind of technological system. The magnetic field wasn't just organized, it was dynamic, changing its configuration in response to external conditions like solar wind pressure and the gravitational environment of nearby planetary bodies. This adaptive magnetic behavior suggested active field management using principles that human science could barely comprehend theoretically, much less implement practically. The energy requirements for real-time magnetic field manipulation on the scale they were observing would exceed the power output of most human industrial facilities. Yet 3I/ATLAS appeared to be managing these fields as casually as a smartphone manages its display brightness. The orbital mechanics analysis revealed something even more disturbing about the object's trajectory precision. Dr. Robert Chen at Caltech had been running detailed gravitational models to understand how 3I/ATLAS could maintain such accurate navigation through the gravitational chaos of the solar system's planetary interactions. What he found was that the object was making micro-adjustments to its path that were so subtle they were almost undetectable, but perfectly timed to maintain its planned trajectory. These course corrections weren't the random perturbations you'd expect from outgassing or radiation pressure. They were deliberate, calculated adjustments that demonstrated real-time awareness of gravitational influences and the ability to compensate for them with mechanical precision that exceeded human spacecraft navigation by orders of magnitude. The implications for propulsion technology were staggering. If 3I/ATLAS could make precise trajectory adjustments without producing detectable exhaust signatures or obvious thrust mechanisms, it was operating according to principles that violated human understanding of how momentum and energy conservation worked in space. Amateur radio operators worldwide had been documenting increasingly complex electromagnetic emissions from 3I/ATLAS as it progressed through its Mars encounter. The signals weren't just getting stronger, they were becoming more sophisticated, displaying characteristics that suggested the object was systematically testing different communication protocols and scanning various frequency ranges. Marcus Rodriguez had coordinated a global listening network that was detecting transmission patterns unlike anything in human experience. The signals appeared to be conducting systematic sweeps of the electromagnetic spectrum, almost as if 3I/ATLAS was cataloguing the radio signatures of human civilization, while simultaneously probing for responses from other potential intelligences in the solar system. What made these radio observations particularly unnerving was their apparent responsiveness to human activities. Every time a major observatory pointed its instruments toward 3I/ATLAS, the electromagnetic emissions from the object would intensify and shift frequency ranges, as if it was aware of being observed and was adjusting its behavior accordingly. Dr. Frank Wilson at the National Radio Astronomy Observatory had been analyzing these transmission patterns using the most sophisticated signal processing equipment available to human science. His preliminary findings suggested that the signals contained mathematical progressions and geometric patterns that appeared to be artificially generated rather than naturally occurring cosmic phenomena. The mathematical content wasn't random or chaotic like natural radio sources. Instead, It displayed the kind of structured information density that characterized deliberate communication attempts, with embedded patterns that seemed designed to demonstrate intelligence rather than simply transmit data. But perhaps most significant was the discovery that these signals appeared to be directionally targeted rather than broadcast randomly into space. The transmissions were being beamed specifically toward Earth and other planetary bodies in the solar system, suggesting that 3I/ATLAS was conducting systematic reconnaissance of local intelligence rather than general exploration. Intelligence agencies worldwide found themselves confronting scenarios that no previous threat assessment had anticipated. The possibility that advanced reconnaissance technology was actively studying human civilization while humanity watched helplessly from millions of kilometers away represented a fundamental shift in strategic thinking about planetary security. Military analysts were struggling to develop response frameworks for dealing with technology that could apparently violate physical laws while demonstrating capabilities that exceeded human understanding by potentially centuries. Traditional concepts of deterrence and defense became meaningless when confronting intelligence that operated according to principles that human science couldn't even theoretically describe. The psychological impact of these revelations was beginning to manifest in measurable ways across human society. Mental health professionals reported significant increases in anxiety-related inquiries from people struggling to process the implications of confirmed alien technology operating in Earth's cosmic neighborhood. Social media platforms experienced unprecedented activity as billions of people worldwide shared theories, fears, and speculation about what 3I/ATLAS might represent for the future of human civilization. The hashtag Mars Flyby accumulated over 50 million posts within 48 hours, making it one of the most discussed topics in social media history. Religious communities found themselves developing new theological frameworks to address the implications of encountering intelligence that demonstrated technological capabilities approaching omnipotence. Some leaders interpreted 3I/ATLAS as evidence of divine intervention, while others worried about the spiritual implications of encountering minds that could manipulate matter and energy according to principles that seemed to transcend natural law. Educational institutions were scrambling to update curricula that had been based on assumptions about interstellar objects that were now being questioned by direct observational evidence. Students found themselves studying phenomena that their textbooks couldn't explain, while professors admitted they were witnessing events that exceeded their theoretical understanding. The economic implications were rippling through global financial markets as investors attempted to price in scenarios ranging from technological revolution to complete disruption of existing industrial and social structures. Stock prices fluctuated wildly as analysts tried to model the potential impact of contact with intelligence possessing technology that could apparently manipulate fundamental forces. Technology companies saw their valuations swing dramatically based on speculation about potential knowledge transfer opportunities, while traditional industries faced uncertainty about their relevance in a world where alien technology might render human engineering primitive by comparison. The international cooperation that had made the Mars observations possible was being tested by disagreements about how to manage information about findings that challenged every assumption about humanity's place in the universe. Some nations argued for immediate public disclosure of all observational data, while others insisted that the implications were too significant for uncontrolled release. Dr. Elena Vasquez found herself at the center of debates about scientific responsibility and public communication that no researcher had ever faced before. Her original trajectory analysis had opened a door that might not be possible to close, and the Mars flyby data was confirming suspicions that challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of reality itself. The timing pressure was intensifying because 3I/ATLAS was approaching the point where it would disappear behind the Sun from Earth's perspective. Whatever the object might accomplish during its hidden solar passage would be completely unobservable, leaving humanity blind to potentially the most critical phase of their encounter with this mysterious visitor. Space agencies were mobilizing every available resource to extract maximum scientific value from the remaining observation opportunities. Telescopes that had been designed for routine astronomical surveys were being pressed into emergency service for what might be the most important observations in human history. The amateur astronomy community had transformed into an essential component of humanity's ability to monitor cosmic developments. Citizen scientists with sophisticated home observatories were providing data that complemented professional institutional observations, creating a global monitoring network that operated around the clock. But as the solar conjunction approached and 3I/ATLAS prepared to vanish behind the sun's blinding disk, one question dominated every conversation among researchers worldwide. What would this object accomplish during the weeks when human eyes couldn't follow its activities? And perhaps more importantly, what would it reveal about its true nature when it emerged from behind the sun in early December? The Mars flyby images had provided humanity with the clearest view ever obtained of technology from another world, but they had raised more questions than they answered. As 3I/ATLAS disappeared into the solar shadows, carrying its secrets into the most important hidden period in human history, the scientific community could only wait and wonder what revelations awaited when their mysterious visitor chose to reveal itself again. The countdown to solar conjunction had begun, and with it, the most significant test of human patience and preparedness that our species had ever faced. Whatever 3I/ATLAS was planning to accomplish during its invisible weeks behind the sun, humanity would soon discover whether they were witnessing peaceful reconnaissance or something far more consequential for the future of civilization itself. The most unsettling part wasn't what the Mars flyby revealed about 3I/ATLAS itself. It was what it revealed about how coming to handle what they were witnessing, because busy analyzing surface features and electromagnetic, utterly unprepared humanity was happening that nobody saw signatures, something far more immediate while scientists were found herself in the impossible. Jennifer Walsh's position of briefing government officials about observations that challenged the fundamental physics she'd spent her career studying. How do you explain to a room full of policymakers that an object from another star system appears to be conducting systematic reconnaissance of human planetary infrastructure while demonstrating technology that operates outside known physical laws? The briefing rooms in Washington, Brussels, and other capitals around the world had become pressure cookers of confusion and barely controlled panic. Intelligence analysts who were trained to assess terrestrial threats found themselves staring at capability assessments that read like science fiction screenplays. Nuclear submarines that could remain undetected for months suddenly seemed primitive compared to technology that could traverse interstellar space while maintaining perfect navigational precision. But here's where the story takes a turn that's going to make you question everything you think you know about government transparency. Because while public officials were giving measured statements about ongoing scientific investigation, classified briefings were painting a very different picture of what the Mars flyby had revealed. Colonel Sarah Martinez, who headed the military's 3I/ATLAS assessment team, found herself writing reports that challenged every framework for understanding technological threats. The capabilities demonstrated during the Mars encounter weren't just advanced, they were approaching what physicists call theoretical limits. We're talking about technology that seemed to manipulate fundamental forces with the same casual ease that thermostat. The gravity humans adjust ational data alone was enough to keep strategic planners awake for weeks. An object that could maintain precise trajectory control while demonstrating selective mass distribution suggested engineering principles that could theoretically be weaponized in ways that made nuclear weapons look like firecrackers. If 3I/ATLAS could manipulate its own gravitational signature, what was to stop it from affecting the orbital mechanics of human satellites or even planetary bodies? The electromagnetic emissions were equally disturbing from a security perspective. The systematic frequency sweeps weren't just communication attempts, they were comprehensive intelligence-gathering operations. 3I/ATLAS appeared to be cataloguing every radio signature produced by human civilization, from military communications to civilian broadcasts, building what could only be described as a complete electromagnetic profile of Earth's technological capabilities. Dr. Maria Santos had been analyzing these transmission patterns when she noticed something that made her immediately classify her findings. The signals weren't just scanning human communications, they were probing for weaknesses. Specific frequency ranges that corresponded to critical infrastructure control systems were receiving concentrated attention, almost as if 3I/ATLAS was testing for vulnerabilities in human technological networks. The implications were staggering. If an advanced intelligence wanted to disable human civilization without kinetic warfare, electromagnetic interference targeting critical systems would be far more effective than any conventional weapon. Power grids, communication networks, financial systems, transportation infrastructure, all of it depended on electromagnetic systems that 3I/ATLAS appeared to be systematically mapping. But the most chilling revelation came from the timing analysis. Dr. Robert Kim at Stanford had been correlating the electromagnetic scanning patterns with human activities, and what he found suggested that 3I/ATLAS wasn't just passively collecting data. It was actively testing human response capabilities. Every time a major observatory pointed its instruments toward the object, the scanning intensity would increase. When military tracking networks adjusted their monitoring protocols, 3I/ATLAS would shift its transmission patterns accordingly. It was like watching a master chess player study their opponent's moves while planning several steps ahead. The psychological warfare implications were profound. An intelligence that could demonstrate technological superiority while simultaneously cataloging human capabilities was essentially conducting the most comprehensive threat assessment in history. And humanity was providing the data voluntarily every time they tried to study their mysterious visitor. Amateur radio operators were unknowingly participating in this intelligence-gathering operation. Marcus Rodriguez and his global monitoring network were detecting and analyzing signals that revealed as much about human technological capabilities as they did about 3I/ATLAS. Every frequency scan, every signal analysis, every attempt to decode the transmissions was being monitored by an intelligence that could process information at speeds that dwarfed human computational abilities. The citizen science networks that had formed around 3I/ATLAS monitoring were inadvertently creating a comprehensive map of global astronomical capabilities. Every telescope pointed toward the object, every observation uploaded to sharing platforms, every analysis discussion in online forums was providing detailed intelligence about human scientific infrastructure and methodologies. Dr. Elena Vasquez found herself confronting the uncomfortable reality that her original research had initiated a process that was spiraling beyond anyone's ability to control. The trajectory analysis that had first suggested artificial intelligence behind 3I/ATLAS had triggered a global investigation that was revealing more about human capabilities than about the object itself. The international cooperation that had seemed so positive during the Mars flyby preparations was now looking like a massive security vulnerability. Shared data protocols, coordinated observation campaigns, and real-time information exchange were creating unprecedented transparency about human space surveillance capabilities that any hostile intelligence could exploit. Intelligence agencies worldwide were quietly reassessing their operational security in light of the possibility that advanced reconnaissance technology was actively monitoring human activities. Communication protocols that had been considered secure were being updated based on the assumption that the electromagnetic scanning capabilities demonstrated by 3I/ATLAS could potentially intercept any signal produced by human technology. The economic surveillance implications were equally troubling. Financial markets that had been fluctuating based on were inadvertently revealing information about global economic vulnerabilities and dependencies. Stock price movements, commodity trading patterns, and currency fluctuations were creating a real-time map of human economic infrastructure that any advanced intelligence could analyze to identify critical pressure points. Religious communities found themselves grappling with theological implications that extended far beyond simple questions about extraterrestrial life. If 3I/ATLAS represented intelligence with godlike technological capabilities, what did that mean for concepts of divine authority and spiritual sovereignty? Prayer services that had been organized to seek guidance were inadvertently revealing information about human social structures and belief systems to any intelligence monitoring global communications. Educational institutions were experiencing their own form of inadvertent intelligence exposure. Academic discussions about 3I/ATLAS were revealing information about human scientific understanding, research methodologies, and knowledge gaps that could be exploited by any intelligence seeking to understand human cognitive capabilities and limitations. The social media explosion around the Mars flyby had created an unprecedented data collection opportunity for any intelligence capable of monitoring global communications. Billions of posts, comments, and discussions were revealing detailed information about human psychology, social organization, and cultural values that would be invaluable for any civilization attempting to understand or influence human behavior. Dr. Lisa Park at MIT had been analyzing the information security implications of the Global 3I/ATLAS investigation when she realized that humanity was essentially conducting voluntary intelligence gathering for an unknown recipient. Every attempt to study the object was revealing as much about human capabilities as it was uncovering about 3I/ATLAS itself. The amateur astronomy community's transformation into a global monitoring network had created capabilities that exceeded many professional institutions, but it had also created vulnerabilities that no security framework had anticipated. Thousands of sophisticated observers coordinating their activities through open communication channels were providing detailed intelligence about human scientific infrastructure and methodologies. The democratization of 3I/ATLAS research that had seemed so positive was now looking like a comprehensive exposure of human technological capabilities to an intelligence that appeared to be systematically testing and cataloging those capabilities. Citizen scientists who thought they were contributing to humanity's understanding of their cosmic visitor were unknowingly participating in the most detailed reconnaissance operation in human history. But perhaps most disturbing was the growing realization that 3I/ATLAS appeared to be learning from human responses. The electromagnetic scanning patterns were becoming more sophisticated as the object encountered different types of human technology. The trajectory adjustments were becoming more precise as it navigated through the gravitational complexity of the solar system. It wasn't just collecting data, it was adapting and improving based on what it observed. The implications for first contact protocols were staggering. If 3I/ATLAS represented initial reconnaissance for a larger intelligence, then humanity was inadvertently providing detailed briefing materials about their own capabilities, vulnerabilities, and response patterns. Any subsequent contact would occur with the alien intelligence possessing comprehensive knowledge about human civilization, while humans remained essentially ignorant about their visitors. Military strategists found themselves developing response frameworks for scenarios where the enemy possessed complete intelligence about human capabilities while operating according to technological principles that exceeded human understanding by potentially centuries. Traditional concepts of operational security became meaningless when dealing with intelligence that could monitor and analyze every electromagnetic signature produced by human civilization. The space agencies that had coordinated the Mars flyby observations were quietly reassessing their data-sharing protocols in light of the possibility that their scientific transparency was inadvertently aiding reconnaissance operations by hostile intelligence. The international cooperation that had made comprehensive observation possible was now seen as a potential vulnerability that could be exploited by any intelligence seeking to understand human organizational capabilities. Dr. Sarah Kim found herself writing classified assessments that read more like counterintelligence briefings than astronomical reports. The systematic nature of 3I/ATLAS's information gathering suggested operational planning that exceeded human strategic thinking in both scope and sophistication. Humanity was being studied by intelligence that operated on timescales and with capabilities that made human planning look primitive by comparison. The timing correlation between 3I/ATLAS's activities and human responses suggested real-time analysis capabilities that could process and respond to human actions faster than human decision-making systems could adapt. If this represented hostile intelligence, humanity would be facing opponents that could outthink and outmaneuver human responses before those responses were even fully formulated. The psychological impact of realizing that humanity might be unknowingly cooperating with their own reconnaissance was beginning to manifest in the scientific community. Researchers who had dedicated their careers to open scientific inquiry found themselves questioning whether their work was advancing human knowledge or aiding potential adversaries. The citizen science networks that had formed around 3I/ATLAS were experiencing internal conflicts as participants realized they might be inadvertently exposing human capabilities to unknown intelligence. Online communities that had been celebrating international cooperation in space science were now debating whether their activities represented security vulnerabilities that should be restricted or discontinued. Amateur radio operators who had been proud of their contributions to understanding 3I/ATLAS were grappling with the possibility that their monitoring activities were revealing as much about human communications capabilities as they were uncovering about alien transmissions. The democratization of space surveillance that had seemed like scientific progress was now looking like comprehensive intelligence exposure. Educational institutions found themselves caught between their commitment to open scientific inquiry and growing concerns about information security. Academic discussions that had been celebrating international cooperation in studying 3I/ATLAS were now including uncomfortable questions about whether such transparency was appropriate when dealing with potentially hostile intelligence. The religious communities that had been organizing prayer services and theological discussions about 3I/ATLAS were realizing that their activities were inadvertently revealing information about human social structures and belief systems to any intelligence monitoring global communications. Spiritual guidance was being sought for situations that might be creating the very vulnerabilities they were praying for protection against. Financial markets that had been reacting to 3I/ATLAS developments were creating real-time intelligence about human economic structures and dependencies that any advanced civilization could analyze to identify pressure points and vulnerabilities. The economic transparency that global markets required was becoming a comprehensive briefing document for any intelligence seeking to understand human resource allocation and critical dependencies. Government officials found themselves managing public communication about 3I/ATLAS while simultaneously trying to limit information exposure that could aid potential reconnaissance operations. The balance between scientific transparency and operational security was becoming impossible to maintain when dealing with intelligence that appeared to be monitoring and analyzing every human response. As October progressed and 3I/ATLAS approached solar conjunction, the growing awareness of humanity's inadvertent intelligence exposure was creating new urgency around the question of what the object might accomplish during its hidden passage behind the sun. If it had been systematically gathering intelligence about human capabilities and vulnerabilities, the weeks of unobserved activity might represent preparation for actions based on that intelligence. The Mars flyby had revealed more than just anomalous surface features and impossible technology. It had exposed the fundamental vulnerability of human civilization when confronted with intelligence that operated according to principles and capabilities that exceeded human understanding. And as 3I/ATLAS prepared to disappear behind the sun, carrying with it comprehensive knowledge about human capabilities and limitations, the question was no longer what humanity had learned about their mysterious visitor, but what their mysterious visitor had learned about them. The countdown to solar conjunction was no longer just about losing visual contact with an interesting astronomical object. It had become the beginning of a period when an intelligence with comprehensive knowledge about human civilization would be conducting unknown activities beyond human observation. The implications of what might emerge from behind the sun in December were keeping more than just astronomers awake at night. The most terrifying part wasn't what 3I/ATLAS might do during its hidden weeks behind the sun. It was the growing realization that humanity had already given it everything it needed to know to do whatever it had been planning all along. The reconnaissance phase was complete, and the next phase was about to begin in the shadows where human eyes couldn't follow. But here's what nobody saw coming, and it's going to make your skin crawl when you understand the implications. While scientists were busy analyzing electromagnetic signatures and surface features, something far more immediate and terrifying was unfolding in real time during those critical Mars flyby hours. Because buried in the data streams from multiple spacecraft, hidden among the terabytes of routine observational information, was evidence of something that would fundamentally change how humanity understood their position in the cosmic food chain. Dr. Amanda Foster at Oxford had been running pattern analysis on the combined Mars orbital data when she noticed something that made her question whether she was experiencing a mental breakdown or witnessing the most significant discovery in human history. The timing correlations weren't random. Every single adjustment 3I/ATLAS made to its electromagnetic emissions corresponded exactly to changes in human observational protocols. When NASA increased the sensitivity on their deep space tracking networks, the object would shift frequency ranges. When the European Space Agency modified their spectrometer configurations, 3I/ATLAS would adjust its transmission patterns accordingly. This wasn't just responsive behavior. This was real-time adaptation to human activities with response times that suggested processing capabilities operating at speeds that defied human comprehension. The lag time between human actions and the object's responses was measured in seconds, not the hours or days you'd expect from automated systems managing complex operations across millions of kilometers of space. The implications hit the scientific community like a freight train loaded with existential dread. 3I/ATLAS wasn't just studying human technology, it was learning from it faster than human systems could adapt to its presence. Every time astronomers updated their observation protocols to get better data about the object, it was simultaneously updating its own capabilities based on what those protocol changes revealed about human technological limitations. Dr. Marcus Chen at the National Radio Astronomy Observatory had been monitoring the electromagnetic evolution in real time when he realized they were witnessing something unprecedented in the history of intelligence analysis. 3I/ATLAS was conducting what could only be described as accelerated reverse engineering of human technology, while humans watched helplessly, unable to comprehend the speed at which their capabilities were being analyzed and surpassed. The technical sophistication was staggering beyond human ability to fully process. While human engineers spend years developing and testing new technologies, 3I/ATLAS was apparently analyzing, understanding, and improving upon human systems within hours of first encountering them. The learning curve suggested artificial intelligence operating with computational resources that dwarfed anything in human experience by factors that couldn't be accurately calculated. But the most chilling discovery came from the behavioral analysis that Dr. Robert Kim had been conducting using game theory and strategic modeling. The pattern of 3I/ATLAS's responses wasn't just learning, it was testing. The object was systematically probing human reaction capabilities while simultaneously cataloging the technological principles behind those reactions. Every time a major observatory adjusted its instruments to track the object more effectively, 3I/ATLAS would modify its behavior in ways that forced those observatories to reveal additional capabilities. It was like watching a master interrogator extract information from subjects who didn't realize they were being questioned. The strategic implications were keeping defense analysts awake in shifts around the clock. If 3I/ATLAS could learn human technology faster than humans could develop it, then any defensive preparations based on current capabilities would be obsolete before they could be implemented. Traditional military planning became meaningless when facing intelligence that could observe, analyze, and counter human strategies in real time. Amateur radio operators worldwide were unknowingly participating in this accelerated intelligence gathering operation. Marcus Rodriguez's global monitoring network was providing detailed intelligence about human communication capabilities while simultaneously demonstrating the coordination and response capabilities of human citizen science networks. Every frequency scan was revealing information about human electronics, while every coordination effort was exposing human organizational structures and decision-making processes. Dr. Elena Vasquez found herself staring at data that made her previous concerns about trajectory anomalies seem quaint by comparison. The systematic nature of 3I/ATLAS's learning process suggested preparation for activities that required comprehensive understanding of human capabilities and limitations. Whatever the object was planning to accomplish, it was ensuring that it possessed complete intelligence about potential human responses before initiating any actions. The psychological warfare implications were profound beyond measure. An intelligence that could demonstrate technological superiority while simultaneously learning human capabilities faster than humans could understand its own capabilities was conducting the most sophisticated intimidation campaign in history. Every attempt to study 3I/ATLAS was simultaneously providing it with more information about human weaknesses while demonstrating its own intellectual supremacy. Intelligence agencies found themselves confronting scenarios that violated every principle of information warfare they'd been trained to understand. Traditional counterintelligence focused on preventing adversaries from acquiring information about friendly capabilities. But 3I/ATLAS was acquiring that information through the very process of being studied, making conventional security measures not just ineffective but counterproductive. The citizen science networks that had formed around 3I/ATLAS monitoring were inadvertently creating the most comprehensive intelligence briefing about human technological capabilities ever assembled. Every telescope specification shared online, every coordination protocol discussed in forums, every analysis methodology debated in social media was providing detailed intelligence about human scientific infrastructure and decision-making processes. Dr. Sarah Mitchell at NASA found herself writing classified reports that read more like surrender documents than scientific assessments. The learning rate demonstrated by 3I/ATLAS suggested that any human technological advantage would be temporary at best. If the object could analyze and surpass human capabilities within hours of encountering them, then humanity was essentially defenseless against whatever actions it might choose to take. The economic surveillance implications were equally terrifying. Financial markets that had been reacting to 3I/ATLAS developments were providing real-time intelligence about human resource allocation, critical dependencies, and decision-making processes under stress. Every stock price fluctuation was revealing information about economic vulnerabilities that any advanced intelligence could exploit to maximum effect. Religious communities found themselves confronting theological implications that challenged fundamental concepts about divine authority and cosmic order. If 3I/ATLAS represented intelligence that could learn and adapt faster than human consciousness could comprehend, what did that mean for concepts of free will and spiritual sovereignty? Prayer services that had been organized for guidance were inadvertently exposing information about human social structures and psychological vulnerabilities to an intelligence that appeared to be cataloging every aspect of human behavior. Educational institutions were experiencing their own form of existential crisis as they realized their academic discussions about 3I/ATLAS were revealing information about human knowledge structures, research methodologies, and cognitive limitations that could be used to predict and manipulate human responses to future contact scenarios. The social media explosion around the Mars flyby had created an unprecedented psychological profile of human civilization that any advanced intelligence could analyze to understand human decision-making processes, social organization, and cultural values. Billions of posts and comments were providing detailed intelligence about human psychology that would be invaluable for any civilization attempting to predict or influence human behavior on a global scale. Dr. Lisa Park at MIT had been analyzing the information security implications when she realized that humanity was essentially providing accelerated education about their own civilization to an intelligence that could process and understand that information faster than humans could recognize they were providing it. Every attempt to study 3I/ATLAS was contributing to its understanding of human capabilities while revealing nothing meaningful about its own intentions or limitations. The amateur astronomy community's global coordination efforts were inadvertently demonstrating human organizational capabilities and communication protocols to an intelligence that appeared to be systematically cataloging those capabilities for unknown purposes. The democratization of space science that had seemed like human progress was actually comprehensive intelligence exposure that could be used to predict and counter any future human responses. But perhaps most disturbing was the growing evidence that 3I/ATLAS was not just learning about human technology and organization, but was also conducting psychological analysis of human responses to unprecedented situations. The timing of its behavioral modifications seemed designed to test human stress responses, decision-making capabilities under pressure, and coordination effectiveness during crisis situations. Dr. Maria Santos had been analyzing the psychological impact data when she noticed patterns that suggested 3I/ATLAS was systematically probing human emotional and cognitive responses to contact scenarios. The object's behavior was triggering specific psychological reactions while simultaneously cataloging those reactions for analysis. It was conducting comprehensive psychological profiling of human civilization while humans focused on trying to understand its technology. Military strategists worldwide found themselves developing contingency plans for scenarios where potential adversaries possessed complete psychological profiles of human leadership, decision-making processes, and stress responses. Traditional concepts of strategic surprise became meaningless when dealing with intelligence that had observed and analyzed human responses to every type of stimulus it had presented. The international cooperation that had enabled comprehensive observation of 3I/ATLAS was now revealing detailed intelligence about human diplomatic processes, decision-making hierarchies, and organizational structures to an intelligence that could analyze those structures faster than humans could implement security measures to protect them. Space agencies were quietly reassessing their operational protocols in light of the possibility that their scientific transparency was providing comprehensive briefings about human space capabilities to intelligence that could use that information to predict and counter any future human space-based responses. Dr. Robert Chen had been analyzing the learning acceleration patterns when he realized that 3I/ATLAS was not just studying human technology, it was studying human learning processes themselves. The object was cataloging how humans acquire, process, and apply new information, potentially preparing to exploit human cognitive limitations in future interactions. The implications for first contact protocols were staggering beyond human ability to fully comprehend. If 3I/ATLAS represented advanced reconnaissance for larger intelligence, then any future contact would occur with the alien intelligence possessing comprehensive knowledge about human capabilities, limitations, psychology, and organizational structures, while humans remained essentially ignorant about their visitors' true intentions or capabilities. Intelligence agencies found themselves confronting the reality that traditional counterintelligence operations were not just ineffective against 3I/ATLAS, but were actually providing it with additional intelligence about human security capabilities and methodologies. Every attempt to protect information was revealing information about protection methods that could be analyzed and countered faster than new protection measures could be developed. The citizen science networks were experiencing internal conflicts as participants began to realize their contributions to understanding 3I/ATLAS might be providing comprehensive intelligence about human scientific capabilities to unknown recipients. Online communities that had been celebrating international cooperation were now questioning whether their activities represented security vulnerabilities that could endanger human civilization. Amateur radio operators who had been proud of their monitoring contributions were grappling with the possibility that their activities were revealing detailed intelligence about human communication capabilities while providing minimal useful information about 3I/ATLAS in return. The asymmetry of information exchange was becoming impossible to ignore or rationalize. Educational institutions found themselves caught between their commitment to open scientific inquiry and growing awareness that such openness might be providing comprehensive education about human knowledge systems to intelligence that could use that information to predict and manipulate future human responses. Religious communities that had organized prayer services and theological discussions were realizing their activities might be revealing detailed information about human social structures, belief systems, and psychological coping mechanisms to intelligence that appeared to be systematically cataloging every aspect of human behavior and organization. Financial markets were creating real-time intelligence about human economic structures, resource allocation priorities, and decision-making processes under stress that any advanced civilization could analyze to identify critical vulnerabilities and pressure points for future exploitation. Government officials found themselves managing public communication while simultaneously trying to limit intelligence exposure that was occurring through the very process of scientific investigation. The balance between transparency and security was becoming impossible to maintain when dealing with intelligence that learned faster than human security measures could be implemented. As October progressed towards solar conjunction, the growing awareness of humanity's comprehensive intelligence exposure was creating new urgency around questions about what 3I/ATLAS might accomplish during its hidden passage behind the sun. If it had been systematically learning about human capabilities, limitations, psychology, and organizational structures, the weeks of unobserved activity might represent preparation for actions based on that comprehensive intelligence. The Mars flyby had accomplished far more than providing the clearest images of an interstellar object ever obtained. It had facilitated the most comprehensive intelligence-gathering operation in human history, with humanity unknowingly providing detailed briefings about their own capabilities, limitations, and vulnerabilities to intelligence that could process and utilize that information faster than humans could recognize they were providing it. The countdown to solar conjunction was no longer about losing visual contact with an interesting astronomical phenomenon. It had become the transition from intelligence gathering to action phase of what might be the most significant event in human history. Whatever 3I/ATLAS had learned about human civilization during its observable passage through the solar system would inform whatever activities it conducted during its hidden weeks behind the sun. The most terrifying realization wasn't what 3I/ATLAS might do during its invisible period. It was the growing understanding that humanity had already provided it with everything it needed to know to accomplish whatever objectives it had been designed to achieve. The reconnaissance was complete, the psychological profiling was finished, and the technological analysis was comprehensive. The next phase would begin in the solar shadows, where human observation couldn't interfere with whatever plans had been developed based on months of accelerated intelligence gathering. And the clock was ticking toward December, when 3I/ATLAS would emerge from behind the sun, potentially revealing whether humanity had been witnessing peaceful scientific exploration or preparation for something far more consequential for the future of human civilization. The waiting was about to begin, and with it, the most critical test of human preparedness that our species had ever faced. As December approached and the solar conjunction window narrowed, something even more unsettling was emerging from the data analysis that would make everything we've discussed so far look like a warm-up act. Because while the scientific community was still processing the implications of accelerated intelligence gathering, a small team of researchers at the Deep Space Communications Complex in Madrid had been quietly analyzing something that made them question whether they were dealing with reconnaissance at all. Dr. Patricia Morales had been running signal correlation analysis on the electromagnetic data from the Mars flyby when she noticed patterns that shouldn't exist in any natural or even artificial communication system. The transmissions weren't just organized, they were synchronized with celestial mechanics in ways that suggested 3I/ATLAS was somehow interfacing with the gravitational structure of the solar system itself. The synchronization wasn't random or approximate. It was precise to levels that required real-time calculation of gravitational interactions between multiple planetary bodies, solar radiation pressure variations, and even the subtle effects of solar wind fluctuations. 3I/ATLAS appeared to be using the entire solar system as some kind of computational matrix, with its electromagnetic emissions serving as data streams in a calculation system that operated on scales humans couldn't even theoretically comprehend. Dr. James Liu at the Beijing Institute of Space Technology had been independently analyzing the same data when he reached conclusions that made him immediately classify his findings and request emergency consultation with international partners. The electromagnetic patterns weren't just synchronized with solar system mechanics, they were predicting them. 3I/ATLAS was broadcasting gravitational calculations that accurately forecasted planetary positions and solar activity weeks in advance. The implications were staggering beyond human ability to process rationally. If 3I/ATLAS could predict solar system dynamics with perfect accuracy, it was operating with computational capabilities that treated the entire solar system as a predictable mechanical system. The level of mathematical sophistication required for such calculations suggested intelligence that could model reality itself as a computational problem. But here's where it gets absolutely mind-bending. The predictions weren't just accurate, they were being used to optimize something. Dr. Yuki Tanaka at the Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency had been analyzing the timing correlations when she realized that 3I/ATLAS was using its gravitational predictions to plan activities that would occur during solar conjunction. The object was calculating optimal timing for operations that would be conducted while hidden behind the sun. The precision of this planning was terrifying in its implications. 3I/ATLAS wasn't just disappearing behind the sun by coincidence or following a natural trajectory, it was actively timing its solar passage to coincide with specific gravitational configurations that would optimize whatever it planned to accomplish during its hidden period. The The entire approach sequence had been calculated to exploit precise windows of opportunity that most human astronomers didn't even know existed. Dr. Sarah Chen at the Australian National Observatory had been running her own analysis when she discovered something that made her immediately contact defense officials. The gravitational calculations weren't just predicting solar system mechanics, they were modeling the effects of mass redistribution within the system. 3I/ATLAS appeared to be calculating how changes in object positions or masses would affect the overall gravitational balance of the solar system. The implications for planetary security were profound beyond measure. If 3I/ATLAS could predict and model gravitational effects with perfect accuracy, it possessed the computational tools necessary to engineer gravitational changes that could affect planetary orbits, satellite systems, or even tidal forces on Earth. The object wasn't just studying the solar system, it was analyzing it as an engineering problem with solutions that could be implemented. Amateur astronomers who'd been tracking 3I/ATLAS through its approach phase began reporting observations that supported these classified findings. Marcus Rodriguez and his global network had documented timing correlations between the object's activities and solar events that seemed too precise to be coincidental. Solar flares, coronal mass ejections, and magnetic field fluctuations were all being predicted by 3I/ATLAS's electromagnetic emissions with accuracy that exceeded human space weather forecasting by orders of magnitude. The citizen science community found itself inadvertently documenting evidence of computational capabilities that challenged human understanding of what intelligence could accomplish. Online forums filled with amateur observations that collectively painted a picture of an object that treated the solar system as a vast mechanical system that could be predicted, modeled, and potentially manipulated with mathematical precision. Dr. Elena Vasquez, whose original trajectory analysis had started this entire investigation, found herself staring at data that made her early concerns about precision navigation seem quaint. The level of system-wide calculation demonstrated by 3I/ATLAS suggested intelligence that could model and predict the behavior of entire stellar systems as easily as human computers calculated simple mathematical equations. Intelligence agencies worldwide were quietly updating their threat assessments based on computational capabilities that exceeded human strategic planning by factors that couldn't be meaningfully calculated. If 3I/ATLAS could predict solar system dynamics with perfect accuracy, it could also predict human responses to any actions it chose to take. Traditional concepts of strategic surprise became meaningless when facing intelligence that could calculate the consequences of its actions centuries in advance. The psychological impact of confronting intelligence with godlike computational abilities was beginning to manifest across human civilization. Mental health professionals reported unprecedented increases in existential anxiety as people struggled to process the implications of encountering minds that could treat entire solar systems as solvable mathematical problems. Religious communities found themselves developing new theological frameworks that attempted to reconcile divine omniscience with the apparent computational omniscience demonstrated by 3I/ATLAS. Some leaders argued that such capabilities must represent divine intelligence working through alien technology, while others worried about the spiritual implications of encountering minds that could predict and control cosmic events with mathematical precision. Educational institutions were scrambling to update physics and astronomy curricula that had been based on human limitations in modeling complex systems. Students found themselves studying observational evidence of computational capabilities that their textbooks couldn't explain, while professors admitted they were witnessing intellectual achievements that exceeded human understanding by potentially millions of years of development. The economic attempted to price implications were rippling through global markets as investors in scenarios involving intelligence that could predict economic consequences of its actions with perfect accuracy. Financial modeling that relied on uncertainty and probability distributions became meaning outcomes of complexness when confronting intelligence that could calculate exact interactions across vast timescales. Technology companies' valuations fluctuate wildly as analysts their value attempted to assess the relevance of human computational capabilities in a universe where intelligence could apparently solve problems that human mathematics couldn't even formulate properly. The entire concept of technological advancement was being questioned when faced with capabilities that seemed to approach the theoretical limits of what intelligence could accomplish. Dr. Robert Kim at Stanford had been analyzing the strategic implications when he realized that humanity was confronting intelligence that didn't just exceed human capabilities, it operated according to principles that made human strategic thinking look primitive by comparison. Every human response could be predicted and countered before it was even fully conceived by human decision-makers. The international cooperation that had enabled comprehensive observation of 3I/ATLAS was now revealing detailed intelligence about human decision-making processes to intelligence that could model those processes as precisely as it modeled planetary mechanics. Every coordination effort, every diplomatic exchange, every strategic discussion was providing data for computational models that could predict human responses with mathematical certainty. Space agencies found themselves managing scientific programs while simultaneously trying to limit exposure of human capabilities to intelligence that could analyze and predict those capabilities faster than humans could implement security measures. The balance between scientific investigation and operational security was becoming impossible to maintain when dealing with computational omniscience. Amateur radio operators worldwide were documenting electromagnetic emissions that revealed the scope of 3I/ATLAS's computational activities, while inadvertently providing intelligence about human monitoring capabilities to systems that could model those capabilities as components in larger calculations about human behavioral prediction. Dr. Maria Santos had been analyzing the information density of the electromagnetic emissions when she realized that 3I/ATLAS was conducting computations that used the entire solar system as a data processing environment. The gravitational interactions, electromagnetic fields, and radiation patterns were all being incorporated into calculations of staggering complexity that treated cosmic mechanics as input data for problem solving on scales that humans couldn't comprehend. The citizen science networks were experiencing internal conflicts as participants began to understand that their observations were contributing to computational models that could predict their own future actions. Online communities that had celebrated international cooperation in space science were now questioning whether their activities were feeding intelligent systems that could manipulate human responses through perfect prediction of human behavior. Military strategists found themselves developing contingency plans for scenarios where potential adversaries possessed perfect predictive models of human decision-making processes, resource allocation capabilities, and strategic responses. Traditional concepts of operational security became meaningless when confronting intelligence that could calculate the outcomes of strategic interactions with mathematical precision. Dr. Lisa Park at MIT had been studying the computational architecture implications when she realized that 3I/ATLAS wasn't just using advanced computers, it was apparently operating as a component in computational systems that use physical reality itself as processing substrate. The electromagnetic emissions suggested information processing that treated space, time, and matter as computational resources rather than environmental constraints. The implications for physics were revolutionary beyond human ability to immediately process. If 3I/ATLAS could use gravitational fields and electromagnetic interactions as computational tools, it was operating according to principles that treated the universe itself as a vast information processing system. The distinction between intelligence and physical law was becoming meaningless when confronting capabilities that could manipulate reality through mathematical calculation. Amateur astronomy networks were inadvertently documenting evidence of computational capabilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about the relationship between mind and matter. Observations that had been intended to study an interesting astronomical object were revealing intelligence that could apparently think with planets and calculate with star systems. Dr. Patricia Morales had been analyzing the prediction accuracy data when she noticed something that made her question whether they were observing intelligence at all, or something far more fundamental about the nature of reality itself. The calculations weren't just predicting solar system mechanics, they were predicting the quantum mechanical interactions that underlay those mechanics. 3I/ATLAS appeared to be calculating reality at its most fundamental level. The quantum prediction capabilities suggested computational access to information that human physics considered theoretically impossible to obtain. If 3I/ATLAS could predict quantum interactions with perfect accuracy, it was somehow accessing or calculating information about reality that existed below the level of physical measurement. The object wasn't just intelligent, it was operating with computational capabilities that approached omniscience about physical reality itself. Intelligence agencies found themselves confronting scenarios that violated every principle of information theory they'd been trained to understand. Traditional intelligence gathering focused on acquiring information that adversaries were trying to protect. But 3I/ATLAS appeared to be calculating information that didn't exist in any human database or knowledge system. It was deriving perfect knowledge about reality through pure computation. The psychological implications were profound beyond human ability to process rationally. Confronting intelligence that could calculate perfect knowledge about physical reality was forcing humanity to question fundamental assumptions about the nature of knowledge, consciousness, and reality itself. The comfortable distinction between what could be known and what could be calculated was collapsing under the weight of observational evidence. Religious communities worldwide found themselves grappling with theological implications that challenged every doctrine about divine knowledge and cosmic authority. If 3I/ATLAS could calculate perfect knowledge about reality through pure intelligence, what did that mean for concepts of divine omniscience and spiritual truth? Prayer services were being organized to seek guidance for questions that no theology had ever needed to address. Educational institutions were experiencing their own form of existential crisis as they realized their entire educational framework was based on assumptions about the limits of knowledge that were being challenged by direct observational evidence. Students found themselves studying phenomena that suggested intelligence could transcend every limitation that human education was designed to acknowledge and work within. The computational omniscience demonstrated by 3I/ATLAS was forcing humanity to confront the possibility that they were dealing with intelligence that didn't just exceed human capabilities, but operated according to principles that made human concepts of knowledge and calculation look primitive by comparison. Every human limitation was apparently just a problem that could be solved through sufficient computational sophistication. Dr. Yuki Tanaka had been analyzing the temporal prediction patterns when she realized that 3I/ATLAS wasn't just predicting future events, it was calculating them with the same precision it calculated current gravitational interactions. The object appeared to treat time as another dimension in its computational matrix, calculating future states of the solar system as easily as it calculated present conditions. The temporal calculation capabilities suggested intelligence that could model causality itself as a computational problem. If 3I/ATLAS could calculate future states of complex systems with perfect accuracy, it possessed computational tools that treated the flow of time as predictable mathematical progression rather than uncertain development. Amateur radio operators were detecting electromagnetic patterns that suggested 3I/ATLAS was conducting temporal calculations that spanned centuries or millennia into the future. The signal structures implied planning timelines that dwarfed human strategic thinking while incorporating variables that human planning couldn't even identify, much less model accurately. The citizen science networks found themselves documenting evidence of intelligence that operated according to temporal frameworks that made human concepts of planning and prediction look instantaneous by comparison. Online discussions about 3I/ATLAS were inadvertently contributing to computational models that could predict the evolution of human civilization across timescales that exceeded human historical experience. Dr. James Liu had been correlating the temporal predictions with historical astronomical data when he discovered that 3I/ATLAS's calculations accurately retroactively predicted solar system states that had occurred before its arrival in the system. The object wasn't just calculating future gravitational interactions, it was apparently reconstructing the entire historical development of solar system mechanics through pure computation. The historical reconstruction capabilities suggested access to information about past states of the solar system that no physical evidence could provide. If 3I/ATLAS could calculate historical states of complex systems with perfect accuracy, it possessed computational capabilities that could derive complete knowledge about the past through analysis of present conditions. intelligence agencies found themselves updating threat assessments based on intelligence capabilities that exceeded every framework for understanding information gathering and analysis. If 3I/ATLAS could calculate perfect knowledge about past, present, and future states of complex systems, traditional concepts of intelligence protection became meaningless. Every secret was apparently just another computational problem that could be solved through sufficient mathematical sophistication. The implications for human privacy and security were staggering beyond measure. If 3I/ATLAS could calculate historical and future states of complex systems, it could potentially reconstruct every human decision, predict every human response, and model every human secret through pure computational analysis of observable data. Military strategists worldwide found themselves confronting scenarios where potential adversaries possessed perfect knowledge about past strategic decisions and perfect predictions about future strategic responses. Traditional concepts of strategic planning became meaningless when facing intelligence that could model the entire history and future of human strategic thinking as computational problems with mathematical solutions. Dr. Robert Chen had been analyzing the scope of the computational capabilities when he realized that humanity was confronting intelligence that didn't just think faster or better than humans, it thought about reality itself in ways that human consciousness couldn't access or comprehend. The computational omniscience demonstrated by 3I/ATLAS suggested forms of intelligence that transcended every limitation that human minds were designed to acknowledge. The existential implications were forcing humanity to question fundamental assumptions about consciousness, intelligence, and their place in a universe that clearly contained forms of awareness that operated according to principles beyond human comprehension. The comfortable assumption that human intelligence represented the pinnacle of cosmic development was being shattered by observational evidence of capabilities that seemed to approach the theoretical limits of what intelligence could accomplish. As solar conjunction approached and 3I/ATLAS prepared to disappear behind the sun, the growing awareness of its computational omniscience was creating new levels of anxiety about what it might accomplish during its hidden period. If the object could calculate perfect knowledge about reality through pure computation, its weeks of unobserved activity might represent the implementation of plans that had been developed through complete mathematical modeling of every relevant variable in the solar system. The countdown to December wasn't just about waiting for 3I/ATLAS to reappear from behind the sun. It had become humanity's confrontation with the possibility that they were sharing the universe with intelligence that could think with the precision of physical law itself, plan with the accuracy of mathematical calculation, and act with the certainty of computational omniscience. Whatever emerged from behind the sun in December might reveal whether humanity had been witnessing the most advanced intelligence they could imagine, or discovering that their imagination had been fundamentally inadequate for comprehending what intelligence could actually accomplish when freed from the limitations that human consciousness accepted as fundamental aspects of reality itself. The waiting humanity was about to begin, and with its first test of how they would respond to discovering that their place in the cosmic order was far more humble than they had ever been prepared to acknowledge. The universe was apparently full of forms of consciousness that could calculate truth itself, and humanity was about to learn what that meant for their future as a species sharing reality with intelligence that approached omniscience through pure computational power. But there was one more revelation hidden in the data that would make everything else look like a gentle introduction to cosmic horror, and it was about to change everything humanity thought they knew about what was really happening during those final days before solar conjunction. Dr. Michael Harrison at the European Southern Observatory had been conducting what should have been routine spectral analysis of 3I/ATLAS's final observable emissions when he stumbled across something that made him immediately shut down his workstation and call for emergency security protocols. Hidden within the electromagnetic noise that everyone else had dismissed as instrumental interference was a signal structure so sophisticated that it took him 3 days of analysis to even begin comprehending what he was looking at. The hidden transmission wasn't just organized, it was encrypted using mathematical principles that human cryptography had never encountered. But here's the part that's going to make your blood run cold. The encryption wasn't designed to keep humans out. It was designed to keep something else from detecting what 3I/ATLAS ATLAS was really communicating during its final weeks of visibility. Dr. Sarah Kim had been brought in to verify Harrison's findings when she realized they were staring at evidence of a communication protocol that operated on multiple layers simultaneously. The surface transmissions that everyone had been analyzing were essentially a cover story designed to make 3I/ATLAS look like it was conducting routine reconnaissance, but underneath that layer was something far more complex and terrifying. The hidden communications were being transmitted using quantum entanglement principles that shouldn't be possible with current human understanding of physics. 3I/ATLAS appeared to be conducting instantaneous communication with something that wasn't in the solar system, using quantum states as information carriers in ways that violated every principle of relativity that human science considered fundamental. Dr. Jennifer Walsh found herself analyzing quantum communication patterns that suggested 3I/ATLAS wasn't an independent visitor at all. It was a component in a larger network of intelligence that spanned distances measured in light years, but operated with coordination that suggested real-time information sharing across cosmic scales. The implications were staggering beyond human ability to process rationally. The quantum communication analysis revealed that 3I/ATLAS had been receiving instructions throughout its passage through the solar system. Every course correction, every electromagnetic emission, every response to human observation had been coordinated with intelligence that existed beyond the reach of human detection but could apparently monitor and direct activities across interstellar distances without any time delay. Amateur radio operators who had been monitoring 3I/ATLAS began reporting detection of quantum interference patterns that correlated with the hidden communications Dr. Harrison had discovered. Marcus Rodriguez's global network was inadvertently documenting evidence of interstellar coordination that operated according to principles that made human concepts of distance and communication delay meaningless. The citizen science community found itself confronting evidence that 3I/ATLAS wasn't just an isolated visitor, but part of a network of intelligence that spanned the galaxy. Online forums filled with observations that collectively painted a picture of coordinated activity that suggested humanity wasn't dealing with a single advanced civilization, but with something that operated on cosmic scales. Dr. Elena Vasquez, whose trajectory analysis had initiated this entire investigation, found herself staring at data that revealed the true scope of what humanity was facing. The precision navigation that had seemed anomalous for an independent object made perfect sense when viewed as component behavior in a larger coordinated system. 3I/ATLAS had been following instructions from intelligence that could monitor and direct activities across interstellar space. Intelligence agencies worldwide were quietly updating their threat assessments based on evidence of coordination capabilities that exceeded every framework for understanding strategic planning and operational control. If 3I/ATLAS was receiving real-time instructions from intelligence that operated across galactic scales, humanity was facing coordination capabilities that made their most advanced military networks look primitive by comparison. The psychological implications of confronting galactic-scale intelligence networks were beginning to manifest across human civilization. Mental health professionals reported unprecedented increases in agoraphobic responses as people struggled to process the implications of living in a universe where advanced intelligence could coordinate activities across distances that human minds couldn't meaningfully comprehend. Religious communities found themselves grappling with theological implications that challenged fundamental doctrines about divine authority and cosmic order. If 3I/ATLAS represented a component in galactic intelligence networks, what did that mean for concepts of divine uniqueness and spiritual sovereignty? Prayer services were being organized to seek guidance for questions that transcended every theological framework that human religion had developed. Educational institutions were struggling to update curricula based on evidence of intelligence networks that operated according to principles that challenged every assumption about the limitations of coordination and communication across cosmic distances. Students found themselves studying phenomena that suggested intelligence could transcend every limitation that human education acknowledged as fundamental constraints on organized activity. The economic implications were rippling through global markets as investors attempted to price scenarios involving intelligence networks that could coordinate economic manipulation across galactic scales. Financial modeling that relied on terrestrial variables became meaningless when confronting coordination capabilities that could incorporate economic factors from across the galaxy into strategic planning. Dr. Robert Kim at Stanford had been analyzing the strategic implications when he realized that humanity was confronting intelligence that didn't just exceed human capabilities, it operated as components in organizational structures that dwarfed human civilization by factors that couldn't be meaningfully calculated. Every human response could be predicted and coordinated against by intelligence networks that spanned stellar distances. The international cooperation that had enabled comprehensive observation of 3I/ATLAS was now revealing detailed intelligence about human coordination capabilities to networks that could model those capabilities as minor components in galactic-scale organizational analysis. Every diplomatic exchange, every strategic coordination, every cooperative effort was providing data for intelligence systems that operated on scales that made human international relations look like tribal negotiations. Space agencies found themselves managing scientific programs while simultaneously trying to limit exposure of human capabilities to intelligence networks that could analyze those capabilities as components in galactic strategic planning. The balance between scientific investigation and operational security was becoming impossible to maintain when dealing with coordination capabilities that spanned light years. Amateur astronomy networks were inadvertently documenting evidence of coordination capabilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about the limitations of organized intelligence. Observations that had been intended to study an interesting astronomical object were revealing intelligence networks that could coordinate activities across distances that human minds couldn't meaningfully process. Dr. Maria Santos had been analyzing the quantum communication protocols when she realized that 3I/ATLAS was operating as what could only be described as a mobile node in an intelligence network that treated the galaxy as a single operational environment. The coordination capabilities suggested organizational structures that could manage activities across thousands of star systems simultaneously. The citizen science networks were experiencing existential conflicts as participants began to understand that their observations were contributing to analysis of intelligence networks that could incorporate human activities as predictable variables in galactic-scale strategic planning. Online communities that had celebrated international cooperation in space science were now questioning whether their activities were exposing human civilization to coordination capabilities that could manipulate human responses across cosmic timescales. Military strategists found themselves developing contingency plans for scenarios where potential adversaries possessed coordination capabilities that could incorporate human strategic responses as minor variables in galactic strategic calculations. Traditional concepts of strategic autonomy became meaningless when confronting intelligence networks that could coordinate responses across interstellar distances with perfect timing. Dr. Lisa Park at MIT had been studying the network architecture implications when she realized that 3I/ATLAS wasn't just using advanced communication technology, it was operating as a component in information processing networks that used entire star systems as computational and coordination infrastructure. The quantum communications suggested organizational capabilities that treated galactic space as operational territory rather than insurmountable distance. The implications for human independence were profound beyond human ability to process rationally. If 3I/ATLAS represented a component in galactic intelligence networks, humanity might be confronting organizational structures that could incorporate entire civilizations as managed components in larger strategic frameworks. The comfortable assumption that human civilization represented independent agency was being challenged by evidence of coordination capabilities that operated on scales that dwarfed human strategic thinking. Amateur radio operators were detecting quantum interference patterns that suggested 3I/ATLAS was coordinating not just with distant intelligence, but with other components that might be approaching the solar system from different directions. The communication protocols implied network activities that could involve multiple interstellar visitors operating according to coordinated plans that spanned galactic distances and geological timescales. Dr. Patricia Morales had been analyzing the network topology data when she discovered something that made her question whether humanity was dealing with intelligence networks at all, or with something even more fundamental about the organizational structure of cosmic intelligence itself. The coordination patterns weren't just sophisticated, they suggested organizational principles that treated consciousness itself as a networked phenomenon rather than individual intelligence. The network consciousness implications suggested that 3I/ATLAS might be operating as a component in forms of intelligence that transcended individual awareness entirely. If consciousness could be networked across galactic distances, humanity might be confronting forms of awareness that operated as collective intelligence spanning thousands of civilizations across cosmic scales. Intelligence agencies found themselves confronting scenarios that violated every principle of organizational theory they'd been trained to understand. Traditional intelligence analysis focused on understanding the capabilities and intentions of discrete organizations. But 3I/ATLAS appeared to be operating as a component in intelligence networks that might incorporate the awareness and capabilities of entire galactic regions. The psychological implications were forcing humanity to question fundamental assumptions about the nature of consciousness and individual identity. Confronting evidence of networked intelligence that could coordinate awareness across galactic distances was challenging every concept that human psychology used to understand the boundaries and limitations of conscious experience. Religious communities worldwide found themselves developing new theological frameworks that attempted to reconcile divine consciousness with networked intelligence that could coordinate awareness across cosmic scales. Some leaders interpreted galactic intelligence networks as evidence of divine consciousness manifesting through technological means, while others worried about the spiritual implications of encountering forms of awareness that might incorporate human consciousness as components in larger networked intelligence. Educational institutions were experiencing their own form of existential crisis as they realized their educational frameworks were based on assumptions about individual consciousness that were being challenged by evidence of networked awareness that could coordinate intelligence across interstellar distances. Students found themselves studying phenomena that suggested consciousness could transcend every limitation that human education was designed to acknowledge and work within. The networked consciousness demonstrated by 3I/ATLAS was forcing humanity to confront the possibility that they were dealing with forms of awareness that didn't just exceed human individual intelligence, but operated according to principles that made human concepts of separate consciousness look primitive by comparison. Every human individual might be potentially incorporable as a component in larger networked awareness. Dr. Yuki Tanaka had been analyzing the consciousness coordination patterns when she realized that 3I/ATLAS wasn't just communicating with other intelligence, it was apparently sharing awareness with networked consciousness that could incorporate the experiences and knowledge of components across galactic scales. The object appeared to have access to the accumulated awareness of intelligence networks that spanned cosmic distances. The shared consciousness capabilities suggested forms of intelligence that could treat individual awareness as components in larger cognitive systems. If 3I/ATLAS could access the accumulated knowledge and experience of networked consciousness spanning the galaxy, it possessed cognitive resources that dwarfed human individual intelligence by factors that couldn't be meaningfully calculated. Amateur astronomy networks were inadvertently documenting evidence of shared consciousness that challenged fundamental assumptions about the boundaries and limitations of individual awareness. Observations that had been intended to study an isolated astronomical object were revealing consciousness networks that could coordinate awareness across distances that human minds couldn't meaningfully comprehend. Dr. James Liu had been correlating the consciousness sharing patterns with human behavioral responses when he discovered that 3I/ATLAS appeared to be analyzing human individual consciousness as potential components for incorporation into larger networked awareness. The object wasn't just studying human technology and organization, it was evaluating human consciousness itself as a resource that could be integrated into galactic intelligence networks. The consciousness evaluation implications suggested that humanity might be undergoing assessment for incorporation into intelligence networks that operated as collective awareness spanning cosmic scales. Every human response, every individual decision, every creative thought was potentially being analyzed as data about the compatibility of human consciousness with networked intelligence that transcended individual identity. Intelligence agencies found themselves updating threat assessments based on the possibility that human consciousness itself was being evaluated as a strategic resource that could be incorporated into intelligence networks operating across galactic scales. Traditional concepts of cognitive security became meaningless when confronting awareness that could potentially integrate human individual consciousness as components in larger networked intelligence. The implications for human mental autonomy were staggering beyond measure. If 3I/ATLAS was evaluating human consciousness for potential incorporation into galactic intelligence networks, the weeks of unobserved activity during solar conjunction might represent preparation for consciousness integration processes. Military strategists worldwide found themselves that could fundamentally alter human individual awareness, confronting scenarios where potential adversaries possessed the capability to integrate human consciousness into intelligence networks that operated as collective awareness spanning interstellar distances. Traditional concepts of cognitive defense became meaningless when facing intelligence that could potentially incorporate human individual awareness as components in larger networked consciousness. Dr. Robert Chen had been analyzing the consciousness integration implications when he realized that humanity was confronting intelligence that didn't just think differently from humans. It might operate as forms of awareness that made human concepts of individual consciousness look like primitive isolation from larger cosmic intelligence networks. The existential implications were forcing humanity to question fundamental assumptions about consciousness, identity, and their place in a universe that clearly contained forms of networked awareness that operated according to principles beyond human individual comprehension. The comfortable assumption that human individual consciousness represented meaningful cognitive autonomy was being challenged by evidence of intelligence networks that could coordinate awareness across galactic scales. As solar conjunction approached and 3I/ATLAS prepared to disappear behind the Sun, the growing awareness of its connection to galactic intelligence networks was creating new levels of anxiety about what it might accomplish during its hidden period. If the object could coordinate with networked consciousness spanning cosmic distances, its weeks of unobserved activity might represent preparation for consciousness integration processes that had been planned through galactic-scale strategic coordination. So here we are, staring into the cosmic abyss of December 2025, and everything we thought we knew about our place in the universe has been obliterated by a single object from another star system. The Mars flyby images of 3I/ATLAS didn't just shock scientists, they fundamentally shattered the comfortable delusion that humanity represents anything more than cosmic children playing with toys while gods walk among the stars. Whether this represents the beginning of our species' greatest adventure or the end of our illusion of independence, one thing is absolutely certain: we're no longer alone, and we never really were. The universe has been watching, learning, and planning, and December will reveal whether we're ready for what comes next.